life has a way of throwing a punch when you're least expecting it. We spend our days hoping for the best, only to be leveled by a sudden car repair, a harsh word from a boss, or a global crisis. We treat these moments like personal betrayals by the universe, but the truth is far simpler. We were caught off guard. When we live in a state of fragile optimism, we aren't just hurt by the event, we are shattered by the surprise. But what if you could take the sting out of misfortune before it even happens? What if you could meet chaos with a calm shrug rather than a panicked heart? Welcome to the practice of Premeditatio Malorum, the Stoic art of premeditating evils. This isn't about being a glass-half-empty person or wallowing in dark thoughts. Instead, it is a sophisticated mental exercise used by Marcus Aurelius and Seneca to build an internal fortress. By the end of this guide, you'll have a mental toolkit to handle whatever the world throws your way, transforming potential catastrophes into manageable hurdles. You will learn to strip away the power of fear by staring directly at it. Before we dive into the depths of Stoic wisdom, make sure to subscribe, join our community of modern Stoics, and get weekly insights on building an unbreakable mind. In our modern culture, we are constantly bombarded with the gospel of positive thinking. We are told that if we manifest success, visualize only the best outcomes, and surround ourselves with good vibes, the universe will somehow conspire to protect us. While optimism can be a powerful engine for motivation, the Stoics identified a hidden danger in this mindset. They called it fragile optimism, and it is one of the most significant sources of human suffering. The problem isn't that we want things to go well, it's that we demand they go well. When we walk into the world expecting sunshine and encounter a storm, we don't just get wet. We get angry, we get depressed, and we feel a sense of cosmic injustice. This section explores why our refusal to look at the dark side of possibility actually leaves us more vulnerable to the very things we fear. The myth of the normal day. We operate under the subconscious assumption that normal means perfect. We expect the car to start, the internet to be fast, our colleagues to be pleasant, and our health to remain constant. In our minds, these are the baseline expectations of life. Therefore, when something deviates from this script, a flat tire, a layoff, a sudden illness, we view it as an intrusion or a bad day. The Stoic perspective flips this on its head. To a Stoic, the normal state of the world is one of flux, decay, and unpredictability. By expecting only the best, we are effectively lying to ourselves about the nature of reality. This lie creates a psychological debt that eventually comes due. When the unexpected happens, we aren't just dealing with a logistical problem, we're dealing with the psychological trauma of a shattered worldview. The mechanics of double damage. When hardship hits the unprepared mind, it inflicts what Stoics consider double damage. This is the fundamental reason why surprise is the enemy of resilience. 1. The primary wound, the event itself. The first level of damage is objective. It is the loss of money, the physical pain of an injury, or the practical difficulty of a broken contract. This is the first arrow. It is often unavoidable and is a natural part of the human experience. However, the event itself is rarely what destroys us. Humans are remarkably capable of enduring physical hardship and material loss when we are focused. 2. The secondary wound, the shock. The second level of damage is subjective, and it is almost always self-inflicted. This is the second arrow, the mental distress caused by the massive gap between our sunny expectations and the cold reality. This is where the true suffering lies. The shock manifests as indignation. Why is this happening to me? Paralysis, being so stunned by the event that you cannot take effective action. Panic, the frantic energy of a person who never considered that things could go wrong. As Seneca wisely noted, the man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. Without anticipation, the shock acts as a force multiplier for the original problem. A $500 car repair is a nuisance. A $500 car repair that you convinced yourself wouldn't happen is a mental breakdown. The fragility of the positive mindset. If your happiness depends on things going exactly as planned, your happiness is a hostage to fortune. This is the high cost of optimism. It makes your peace of mind incredibly cheap and easily stolen. Consider the difference between two travelers. One assumes the flight will be on time, the weather will be perfect, and the hotel will be spotless. The other, practicing a bit of Stoic realism, acknowledges that flights are often delayed, rain is possible, and hotels make mistakes. When the flight is inevitably cancelled, the first traveller is in a state of rage at the gate agent, their vacation ruined before it began. The second traveller, having already pre-lived this possibility in their mind, simply opens a book and looks for the next available flight. They are not happy about the delay, but they are not disturbed by it. Their internal fortress remains intact because their expectations were aligned with the messy reality of global travel. The psychological cost of avoidance. Why do we avoid thinking about hardship? Because it feels uncomfortable in the moment. We think that by ignoring potential evils, we are keeping them at bay. In psychology, this is known as experiential avoidance. However, avoidance doesn't make the threat go away. It only ensures that when the threat arrives, we have zero defensive maneuvers ready. By refusing to contemplate loss, we also become slaves to our possessions and circumstances. If you never imagine losing your job, you will live in a constant underlying state of anxiety about your boss's every mood. You are optimistic on the surface, but underneath, you are terrified because you haven't reconciled with the possibility of change. The Stoic solution: hardening the soul. The Stoics argued that we should be like a king who builds his city walls during a time of peace. It is foolish to start laying bricks once the enemy is already at the gates. Most people wait until they are in the midst of a crisis to try and find their inner strength. The Stoic prepares that strength every morning by acknowledging that the world is under no obligation to satisfy their desires. By acknowledging the high cost of optimism, we realize that our current strategy of hoping for the best is actually a form of self-sabotage. To truly be unshockable, we must move past the superficiality of good vibes only, and embrace a more rugged, durable form of mental preparation. At first glance, the concept of Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils, sounds like a recipe for a clinical depression. In a world that tells us to think happy thoughts and visualize success, the idea of sitting in a quiet room and vividly imagining our own ruin seems counterintuitive, if not outright morbid. However, for the Stoic, this practice is the ultimate tool for liberation. It is not about being a pessimist, it is about being a realist. It is the systematic practice of staring disaster in the face so that it loses its power to blink you. To understand Premeditatio Malorum, we must first distinguish it from worry. Worry is a passive, chaotic, and draining emotion that loops in the mind without a resolution. Premeditation, on the other hand, is an active, structured, and strengthening exercise. While worry weakens the spirit, premeditation tempers it like steel in a furnace. The anatomy of the practice. Instead of closing your eyes to potential disaster and hoping it passes you by, you lean into the discomfort. You purposefully invite the ghosts of your future into the room. You sit down and ask yourself the hard questions that most people spend their entire lives sprinting away from. What if I lose my job tomorrow? You don't just think the thought, you follow it. You imagine the conversation with your boss, the walk to your car with a box of belongings, and the look on your family's face. You imagine the tight budget and the grueling job hunt. What if this relationship ends? You imagine the silence in the house, the division of assets, and the pang of loneliness. What if I get sick? You imagine the loss of mobility, the hospital walls, and the frustration of a body that no longer obeys your commands. This sounds heavy, and it is. But as you rehearse these scenarios, a strange and miraculous shift begins to happen in your psychology. By bringing the evil from the dark shadows of the unknown into the light of your conscious mind, you realize two vital truths that change the way you live. Truth number 1, the discovery of your own resilience. The first realization is that many of these disasters are survivable. Much of our anxiety stems from a vague, shapeless fear of the end. We treat a job loss or a breakup as if it were a literal death sentence. Premeditatio Malorum forces you to realize that there is life after. When you mentally rehearse losing your job, you don't just stop at the moment of being fired. You visualize yourself updating your resume. You visualize yourself cutting expenses. You visualize yourself surviving. By pre-living the catastrophe, you realize that while the event would be difficult, unpleasant, and perhaps even painful, it is not the end of your character or your ability to reason. You find that you have an internal pilot light that stays lit even when the external world gets cold. You develop a plan of action in the safety of your own mind so that if the event ever actually occurs, you aren't starting from zero. You are executing a script you have already written. Truth Lesson 2. The birth of radical gratitude. The second realization is perhaps even more powerful. You begin to appreciate what you have right now because you recognize its fragility. The greatest enemy of happiness is hedonic adaptation, the tendency for humans to quickly get used to the good things in their lives until they no longer provide joy. We take our health for granted until we feel pain. We take our partners for granted until they leave. We take our freedom for granted until it is restricted. Premeditatio Malorum acts as a reset button for your gratitude. When you spend 5 minutes truly imagining what your life would be like if you lost your eyesight, and then you open your eyes and see the colours of the room, the sky, and the faces of your loved ones, those things suddenly regain their lustre. You no longer see your life as a series of mundane obligations. You see it as a collection of fragile gifts that could be reclaimed by fate at any moment. By imagining the loss of what you love it more deeply while you have it. You stop postponing your happiness for a future that may never come and start inhabiting the present moment with a ferocity that optimists can never achieve. The immunization of the soul. Think of Premeditatio Malorum as a mental vaccine. A vaccine works by introducing a weakened version of a virus into the body. The immune system learns to recognize the threat, builds defenses, and prepares its memory cells. When the actual, full-strength virus arrives, the body isn't surprised, it's ready. It fights back immediately and effectively. Premeditatio Malorum does the same for your mind. By introducing weakened versions of hardship through visualization, you build up your emotional antibodies. You train your mind to stay rational when the virus of misfortune hits. While the rest of the world is paralyzed by the fever of shock, you're already in the recovery phase because you've been through this before, in your mind, staring at the sun without blinding yourself. It is important to note that the Stoics didn't suggest we live in a constant state of gloom. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, began his day by saying, "The people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." He wasn't being a jerk. He was preparing his mind so that when he encountered a surly person, he wouldn't lose his temper. He had already spent the anger in his morning meditation, leaving him with nothing but patience for the actual encounter. This practice allows you to move through the world with a quiet confidence. You're no longer a leaf blown about by the winds of fortune. You're a mountain. The winds may howl and the snow may fall, but the mountain has already accounted for the weather. Transitioning to action, understanding the philosophy of Premeditatio Malorum is only the first step. The real power lies in the climax, that specific moment where the fear actually breaks and turns into power. This is where the mental exercise transitions from a thought experiment into a life-altering shift in identity. There is a specific crystalline moment in the practice of Premeditatio Malorum that changes everything. It is the pivot point where the exercise stops being a dark visualization and starts becoming an invincible superpower. This is the climax of the Stoic journey. The moment you successfully transition from paralyzing fear to rational indifference. Most people spend their lives running away from their shadows. They believe that if they turn around and look at their fears, those fears will consume them. But the Stoic discovery is the exact opposite. When you stop running, turn around, and walk directly toward the beast of your worst-case scenario, the beast shrinks. This is the key moment, the psychological click where the power dynamic between you and the universe is reversed. The spiritual stress test. Imagine sitting in a quiet room, the door closed, the world silenced. You're not just casually thinking about a problem. You're performing a stress test on your soul. Engineers do this with bridges. They apply simulated pressure far beyond what the bridge is expected to hold to see where the cracks form. By vividly imagining your worst-case scenario, the loss of your reputation, the bankruptcy of your business, the death of a dream, you're applying maximum pressure to your mental foundations. At first, your heart might race, your palms might sweat. This is the panic phase. Your ego is screaming, trying to pull you away from the thought. But if you stay seated, if you refuse to look away, something miraculous happens. The internal panic starts to subside. The human brain is a survival machine. When it is forced to confront a vivid mental image of a disaster, it eventually stops screaming and starts calculating. The transition happens when you stop asking, "Why is this happening?" and start asking, "What would I do next?" from victim to architect. In this climax, you stop being a victim of fate and start becoming the architect of your own endurance. As the initial wave of fear recedes, you begin to develop a plan in the wreckage of your visualization. If the bank accounts are frozen, I will call this person. If the house is gone, I will sleep on that couch. If my health fails, I will focus my remaining energy on these books. Suddenly, the unspeakable has been spoken. The unthinkable has been thought. By mapping the terrain of your worst fears, you have effectively colonized them. They are no longer territory of the monsters. They are just another part of the map. You realize that while these events would be objectively difficult, they do not possess the power to destroy your character, your prohairesis. This is the reversal of power. Before the exercise, the evil held you hostage through the threat of the unknown. After the exercise, you hold the evil in your hand like a solved puzzle. You have taken the worst the universe can offer and you have said, "Is that all? I have already lived through this in my mind and I am still here." The death of the surprise. The climax brings you to a shattering realization. Hardship is only a surprise if you choose to be blind to the nature of the world. We feel shocked by tragedy because we have spent years telling ourselves a fairy tale, the story that the world is a stable, predictable place that owes us a linear path to success. The key moment of Stoicism is the death of this fairy tale. You look at the history of the earth, the rise and fall of empires, the shifting of tectonic plates, the inevitable cycle of life and death, and you realize that the world is change. To be surprised by a layoff, a betrayal, or a sudden illness is like being surprised that it gets dark at night. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of the rules of the game. By expecting the storm, you have already secured your perimeter. You have battened down the hatches and checked the supplies. While the rest of the world is running around in a state of frantic shock, looking for an umbrella that doesn't exist, you're already halfway to safety. You're standing on the deck of your ship watching the waves completely composed, the indifference of the invincible. This is not the indifference of someone who doesn't care about their life. It is the indifference of the invincible. It is the state of mind that says, "I prefer to be wealthy, healthy, and loved. But if the universe decides otherwise, I have already rehearsed the loss. My happiness is not a hostage to these external things." When you reach this climax, you experience a profound sense of lightness. The heavy lifting of anxiety is over. You have already lost everything in your mind, so you no longer have anything to protect with your fear. This makes you dangerous to the obstacles in your path. A person who is not afraid to lose is a person who cannot be manipulated, coerced, or broken. The shift in identity. In this moment, your identity shifts from the person things happen to the person who handles things. You no longer view yourself as a fragile glass ornament that might shatter if the shelf shakes. You view yourself as the flame that Marcus Aurelius described, the fire that consumes everything thrown into it and uses it to grow brighter and higher. The climax of Premeditatio Malorum is the moment you realize that the sting of misfortune was never in the event itself. It was in your refusal to see it coming. Now that your eyes are open, the sting is gone. You are ready. Premeditatio Malorum is the ultimate psychological pivot. It turns your greatest fears into mere data points and transforms you from a victim of circumstance into a master of your own perspective. By the time a hardship actually arrives, it is no longer a monster, it is a guest you have already prepared for. To carry this shield daily, remember these 3 core pillars. Anticipate. Never let the first time you think about a problem be while it is happening. The shock of the new is what breaks the spirit. By pre-living the difficulty, you ensure that your rational mind is already on the scene when the crisis hits. Gesti, decatastrophize. When you stare a disaster in the face, you strip it of its supernatural power. You see challenges for what they truly are. Logistical hurdles, temporary pains, or material losses, rather than the world-ending catastrophes your anxiety whispers about. Appreciate. This practice is the greatest fuel for gratitude. By realizing that everything you love is held on a temporary loan from fate, you stop sleepwalking through your life. You love more intensely, speak more kindly, and live more deeply because you know the value of the present. Don't just read about this. Practice it. Theory is a map, but practice is the journey. Take 5 minutes right now. Sit in silence and pick one specific thing you're worried about. Imagine the worst-case version of it coming true. Don't flinch. Visualize yourself remaining calm, finding a logical solution, and moving forward. By pre-living the struggle, you own the outcome. Drop a comment below and let me know. What is one evil you're going to premeditate today to take away its power? Let's build an unbreakable mind together. Stay stoic.